Welcome to episode 19 of PokeClass. This week has yet again been packed full of talk about Gengar Prime and the release of Lost World, but I covered that last week. If you haven't seen it yet, just click here to go straight to it. This week, I'm going to be doing a second part to the Money Matters article, which started in this video. This part is going to be all about the expense of top tier decks, as well as providing you with a list of budget decks which are still out to win. But first, some news. This week hasn't seen a lot of news to do with the trading card game, so I'm just going to go over a brief issue that has happened recently, which I haven't covered. The subject is the change of states prizes from trophies to medals. This has sparked a lot of discussion on PokeGym, and many people are disappointed with the choice. I do agree that the trophies looked good, and winning one would be better than a cities-like medal. We have only been given a description of these new medals as bigger and more colourful than cities medals. This sounds okay, but we'll just have to wait and see when states come around to find out what they really look like. That's all we have for news today, so it's on to the main feature. Today is part 2 of my Money Matters articles. This part is going to be all about top tier decks and the amount of money that they can cost. I'm also going to go over the cost of staple cards in the current metagame, as well as budget decks that can still pack a punch in a high grade tournament. First off, let's have a look at 3 top tier decks which took the top 3 most victorious deck spots for cities this year. I'll total up how much each of them cost along with their most expensive cards, and then I'll go over the best ways to obtain key cards for the deck. The first one is Vilegar. This deck has the 3rd most successful deck this year in City Championships and thrives off of a trainer lock and hitting for high damage with Gengar's Poltergeist, as well as levelling down opposing level X's with its own level X. I'm sure you know how the deck works, but how expensive is this thing? Well, this one is the cheapest of the top 3, as you would expect, and this is a list I base my evaluation on. As you can see, this list is currently incomplete, but this will give you an idea of how much the skeleton of a Vilegar list will be. For this part of Money Matters, all of my price guides were taken from trollandtoad.com. Some prices will vary from other sites and may not be completely accurate, but here it goes. This Vilegar skeleton will set you back around $167 or £103. Considering this is one of the cheapest top tier decks, some of you may be thinking, wow, that's expensive, and you'd be correct. Decks and cards are expensive, especially cards that are used in every deck in the format, also known as staples, and I'll explain a little bit more about those later. Some of these cards may have been overestimated in value, such as Broken Time Space and Duxie, both valued at $10 each, but at least you get a rough idea. The most expensive cards from this deck would be Gengar Level X at $17, along with the playset of Broken Time Space at $40. This is just a rough deck list, but if you are looking for a deck that's doing well to try out, then Vilegar is the cheapest of the top 3. In its second is Gyarados, which contains cards such as Gyarados from Stormfront, Sableye, also from Stormfront, and Regice from Legends Awakened. Here's the list. This is a complete list taken from an example on the PokeBeach forums, so you'll get an idea of a full list evaluation. So this Gyarados build will cost you around $271 or £168, quite a bit more expensive than Vilegar, but you need to take into consideration that Uxie Level X is in this build. Uxie X is one of the most expensive cards in the format and is great to have, but the price of it means that some people just can't use it. Without Uxie X, you may be able to run a 3rd normal Uxie, and this will bring the price down to around the same as Vilegar. So the most expensive cards in this list are Broken Time Space, Poketurn, and Gyarados can become pretty pricey because of its recent popularity. Poketurns are also a popular card due to the amount of SP decks around at the moment, and will set you back around $7 each. This deck is extremely popular since the release of Triumphant and is a highly competitive deck at the moment. With the ability to hit hard and fast against almost any deck, it could be your next choice for upcoming states. Now on to the most expensive deck in the format. You've probably guessed it by now, but it's Luxchomp. This deck has been dominating the format so far this year, as well as last year, which has led to it becoming a hard set of cards to obtain. The amount of level X's and the entire SP engine are now pretty tough to come by, which means that they have quite a high price tag per card. This is a list that I use to evaluate, but every Luxchomp list is different, so just take this as a rough guide. This deck will set the player back around $302 or £187. This is an extremely high price for a deck if you're on a tight budget and can take a while to get hold of. The most expensive cards in this deck are some of the most expensive in the format, including Luxray GL Level X, Uxie Level X, and Promo Croak. Luxray X and Uxie X by themselves take up almost half the deck's cost, and if you want to run 2 Luxray X's, which a lot of players suggest, the price gets higher again. Garchomp Sea Level X is pretty easy to get hold of, as they made it into a tin promo, so you can start off by getting a couple of those pretty easily. The SP engine may be tough to complete, but many places stock it now, maybe a little overpriced, but you can still get them through other means. So those are the top 3 decks, which are also the most expensive in the game at the moment. So where do you start if you want to build these things? Let's discuss staple cards. Staple cards are cards that can be splashed into almost every deck and make the basis of the game. Cards that aid every deck are given the name staples, as they are required to make decks run as efficiently as possible. Here's a small list of staples that can be put into any stage 1 or 2 decks, such as Vilegar, Machamp, and Charizard. As you can see, most of the staples come in relatively cheap, except for Uxie and Broken Time Space. Uxies are a little easier to get than Broken Time Space, so I'd say that Uxies are worth a bit less than $10. Now if you're thinking of running SP, you may have to dish out a little bit more money, so if you're on a tight budget, I'd suggest getting around 3 or 4 each of these staples as a good start. These cards are mostly pretty recent, so they'll be a worthy investment as they will last until the end of next season. This obviously excludes Uxie, Broken Time Space, and Azelf. Buying these cards will give you a great boost into starting your own deck collection, as you'll be able to build the basis of most decks with these cards. If you're building SP, a standard SP engine of 4 Cyrus, 4 Poketurn, 3 Power Spray, 3 SP Radar, and 3 Energy Gain will cost you around $57 or £35. This is relatively cheap compared to the staples listed above, but you'll also need to buy some of the staple cards to build the deck correctly. Cards like Pokemon Collector, Bebe Search, Pont, Uxie, and Azelf will add to the cost of the SP engine, so bear in mind what deck to build if you're on a budget. So if you're on a tight budget, what should you do? To get these staple cards can be expensive, but there are other ways to obtain these. The way that I would suggest is trading. Whether this is in person or over the internet, trading is a great way to obtain the key cards for any deck, like Uxie and Broken Time Space, which can cost a lot online. You can also buy cards from these websites, which can work out cheaper than shops too. If you want more advice on how to get cards, then check out this episode with part 1 of Money Matters. So you've seen the most expensive decks in the format, but maybe realised you can't afford them. There are plenty of other decks which can be highly competitive and can be cheaper than the top decks in the format. I'm going to give you 3 examples today, which are Charizard, Kingdra, and Uxie. Let's start with Charizard. For these deck prices, I'm going to compare the Pokemon lists alone, as the rest of the bulk of the deck is generally the same from the staples mentioned earlier. Here is the average Charizard lines. The added benefit of running Charizard is that a blister pack with a 1/1 line of what you need is available for only $5, plus you get a booster pack. This means that you're getting a 4/4 line of Charizard for only $20, less than a third of the price of a single Uxie Level X. You will also need a small line of Ninetales from Heart Gold Soul Silver, which will cost around $8. This card is great for draw power as it has its own built-in draw engine, and this is why it's such a great competitive deck. Typhlosion Prime is also an option, which is a tin promo, so you could get a tin or just buy the card alone for around $2. This makes Charizard about $40 including the rest of the Pokemon lines. You may not need to run Uxie in this list because of Ninetales' power, but that's down to testing, which may bump up the price if you can't get them in trades. Overall, this is a very cheap deck which can take some high places in local tournaments. Second is Kingdra. This deck was popular last format, but with Luxray Level X being around, it has dropped in popularity, but it's still a viable deck choice. Here's an example of a Kingdra Pokemon list. 3 Kingdra Primes and 1 from Legends Awakened are at the heart of the deck and will cost around $20, and with the basic in stage 1, it'll be no more than $25. This list also runs Uxie, Mesprit, and Crobat, which won't cost a lot apart from Uxie, which I again suggest getting from trades. This makes Kingdra about $50, a little bit more expensive than Charizard, but still a good choice for a budget, as it only tends to run a thin line of Pokemon. Bear in mind that with a thin line of Pokemon, you may have to pay for a bit more trainers and supporters, but it won't rival the price of an Uxie or Luxray Level X. The last budget deck is Uxie. Many people really don't like this deck, as it thrives off of getting the first turn win, but it's a cheap deck to make. Here's an example of Pokemon lines. 4 Uxie will be the most expensive to get hold of, but they were made as a league promo, so you should get those via trading. Unknown Eye will be around $6, 4 Crobat G is $12, and optional cards like Unknown Q and Dunsparce from Heart Gold Soul Silver will only be a few cents. This makes the Pokemon lines for Uxie a mere $20 if you trade for Uxies. This is great for someone on a really tight budget, but you'll need a lot of trainers. Speed trainers such as Pokedraw Plus, Pokeblower Plus, Expert Belt and others will only go for around $5 a set or less. This makes for a great budget deck compared to top tier, and it has an immense success after the release of Triumphant this year. If you want to go even cheaper than Uxie, Shop It from Platinum will be cheaper and requires more strategy than just donking, if that's what you're worried about. Those are just 3 of the decks that a budget player can look for. Pokemon cards can become really expensive, and having the best decks are nice, but they aren't for everyone. There are a sheer amount of decks out there, which can be built for much less money than Luxchomp, with a good chance of beating them with practice. So if you're a new player, or don't have a lot of money at your disposal, make sure you check out these decks, practice with them, and you could be going far with your budget deck. That's all I have for you this week. Make sure you check back midweek for another deck surgery, and I hope I helped you all with the financial side of the Pokemon trading card game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.